Hello and welcome to Simple-ESL, the simple way to learn English. And in today's lesson, we're going to be describing experiences and telling stories with a narrative tense. So by the end of the lesson, students will be able to describe experiences and clearly and effectively use narrative tenses. So we are looking at past simple, past continuous, and past perfect. And we're going to use this to tell stories. And part of this will also be organizing ideas in a logical way. It's important for sharing experiences, and if you'd like a bit more practice, why not use our lessons and worksheets and the QR code shown here? This will take you to our Patreon page and you can access all of our materials. But let's begin our lesson. Now, when we're telling stories, we need to use narrative tenses. So these are tenses and these can describe actions, and this will depend on when the action took place. So let me grab my pen, and we can see here that we have past simple tense. This is for completed actions in the past. I visited Paris last summer. This is something that happened before, in the past. I visited Paris last summer. Past continuous. This is for actions that are ongoing or background events, things in the background. I was walking along River Seine when it started to rain. So I was doing an action, it was ongoing, and it started to rain. This is a background event. As we can see here, started to rain. And past perfect. These are actions completed before another past action. So something that happens before another action. By the time we arrived, the museum had already closed. So an action that takes place before another past action. And we can use these to tell narratives, to tell stories. This is important when you're telling people things that have happened to you in the past. But how do we structure these stories? We use a three-part structure. We have the introduction. This is used to set the scene. When, who, where, why, things like this. Last year, I went hiking in the Alps with my friends. This sets the scene, tells you what is going to happen, when it happened, and who was involved. My friends in the Alps last year. Now we're looking at the main events. This is where we get the main juicy information. We describe the actions and events in detail. So we went to the Alps with our friends. What did we do there? We went climbing. While we were climbing, a storm started. We found shelter in a small hut. This goes into more detail and describes what happened at the event, what happened, what was going on during the story. And the final part of our story, we want to have an ending. We call this a conclusion, the end or the result, and something to look back and think about. So we went climbing in the Alps with our friends. How do we finish this story? In the end, it was an unforgettable experience, even though it was scary at the time. It gives us a moment to think about the story that has taken place and to summarize, to finish. We call this conclude the story. So through this and the storytelling, we need to use tenses. Let's practice using narrative tenses. I'd like us to match these sentences to the correct narrative tenses. He had never seen snow before that trip. We were talking when the lights went out. They climbed to the top of the mountain. For the first one, he had never seen snow before that trip. Is that past perfect, past simple, or past continuous? 3, 2, 1. Past perfect tense. How about we were talking when the lights went out? Do you think this is past simple, past continuous, or past perfect again? Seems different to past perfect. Were they doing an activity when another thing happened in the past? That would make it past continuous. And our final one, they climbed to the top of the mountain. Is this past perfect, past simple, or past continuous? 3, 2, 1. That is past simple tense. And if you'd like more practice with this, do use the QR code at the beginning of the presentation, or you can take a look at the description for our link to our Patreon with lots of worksheets. Story sequencing. So this is putting the story in that structure, the beginning, the middle, the end, the conclusion. This is what we're trying to do. So I'd like us to put the sentences in the correct order to make a logical story, a story that makes sense. Finally, they managed to repair the car and continue their trip. Does this feel like the beginning, the middle, or the end of the story? They had driven halfway when the car broke down. Last weekend, they decided to go on a trip. Now, which of these sentences sets the scene, starts our story? Which gives a lot of detail and information? And which wraps up, finishes the story and gives us a conclusion, something to reflect on? This is the most logical layout for the story. Last weekend, they decided to go on a road trip. They had driven halfway when the car broke down. Finally, they managed to repair the car and continued their trip. A little bit more practice, and these examples can be found in the worksheet on our Patreon page. I would like us to complete the sentences using the correct tense, the correct narrative tense. Use the verbs shown in the brackets, the parentheses. While he drive, he notice a strange noise from the engine. While he was driving, he noticed a strange noise from the engine. Let's try another one. She prepare dinner when her guests call to cancel. She was preparing dinner when her guests call called. She was preparing dinner when her guests called to cancel. It's fantastic work. What I'd like you to do, and this is found in our worksheet, but I thought you might like to practice, is some independent practice. Try to write 3 or 4 sentences and describe a memorable experience, something that's happened to you. It's important to use all 3 narrative tenses, and don't forget the structure. We need a beginning, a middle, and an end, a conclusion. I had planned to surprise my friend for their birthday. While I was waiting outside their house, it started to rain. Luckily, they arrived just as I was getting soaked. This is an example of a story. We have the beginning here. What I planned to do, I had planned. We then go on to the description of the event. So there was something happening. I was waiting outside their house when another thing happened. It started to rain. And then a conclusion, how the story ends. Luckily, they arrived just as I was getting soaked. And this is going to wrap up our lesson, our conclusion. And what have we learned today? We've learned to describe experiences using narrative tenses, and we've learned how to structure stories with a clear beginning, middle, and end. We also know how to share experiences and have conversations. But in the next lesson, I'd like you to practice building your fluency by speaking to people outside the classroom and trying to tell stories. For the next lesson, we will focus on asking and answering follow-up questions during conversations. But that's the next lesson. If you'd like some more practice, use the QR code to access our lessons and worksheets, and we will see you next time. Have a wonderful day.